Now, one thing that I might be clear to you, or maybe not, is that marriage is not only just between two people. It never really has been, and it never stays that way, even if you elope. And here in Las Vegas, we're in the land of elopers. But for a long time, anthropologists have ignored the concept of romantic love as part of this process. But anthropologists are increasingly becoming interested in this aspect, that actually the affinity between people and their love for one another is an important element and aspect. Even though we try to be socially scientific about it, there are things like romantic love, which is a factor in the interpersonal relationships of the people they study. So anthropologists have largely ignored that aspect because it's a little bit too nebulous, a little bit too hard to control those aspects. But this has begun to change, and anthropologists are increasingly becoming aware of the idea that romantic love is an important factor in marriage. But for most of the world and for most of history, marriage was not really about the two people involved. It was about the families from which they came and the alliances that were made between families as these 2 points of contact, the marriage partners, were coming together. And so they brought with them their families, and that created durable alliances. And the offspring were the outcome, the outgrowth of these alliances. And depending on the way that you formulate your family groups, women and men have different values associated with them. And so if you come from a patrilineal, patrilocal society, women tend to be valued less. And so as less than men in those situations. And in that case, as the value of women is less than men, when a woman comes into a male partner's family, that is now a burden on that family, or it's viewed as that at least. And so gift exchange becomes part of this based on the relative value that's placed on women or men. So for a gift from the husband family to the wife's family, that's a recognition that you're losing something valuable. So that shows that there is actually some degree of value placed on a woman, because you're losing the family that she had, her family of orientation that she came from, is losing her companionship, her labor, her advice, and all sorts of things. The gifts can be given to make up for the loss of the woman from that family group. This is called lobola, or bride price sometimes. And this is also becomes insurance against divorce. It says, we're giving you this gift, so you better stick with us because we've paid for you. This is an agreement between descent groups as gifts get transferred between families. And things like incompatibility and infertility can threaten marriages in this case, especially with lobola customs, because this is a bride price. This has been paid. And sometimes in cases of infertility, for instance, a husband is sometimes allowed to marry another woman from his wife's family if they are not either incompatible or infertile. The opposite of this, of lobola, is what's called dowry, and that's a substantial gift from the wife's family to the male partner's, the husband's family, and that is often correlated with very low female status. For instance, from my own experience, I've worked a lot with Bedouin in the Middle East. And you think of Bedouin, they're mobile herders. They tend to be mobile groups. They're pastoralists, and they live in tents. The tent, although it's a male household head, the head of the household is always a male. The tent that the family lives in is made by the wife, by the bride, when she was an adolescent. And so in preparation for marriage, she collected goat skins and she would sew them together and make a very big tent. And that's an attraction for a potential husband, because the wife brings with her not just herself, because she is of low value and low status in this group. She brings with her also a house. And so she brings the tent with her, and so that is an attraction. And that, you find these dowries, that's what it's called, the gift from a wife's family to the husband family, you find them all over the world. Another place that I worked in, Cyprus, they have these very nice looking what they're called are bridal chests, and it's a wooden box, a wooden chest that a father and her makes for his daughter, and his daughter fills it with all of the bed linens that will go into the household when she gets married, and that's part of her dowry. She brings that with her marriage. Now, I mentioned briefly before that sometimes there's some instances where you can have multiple or a succession of marriages. In many non-industrial societies, there are allowances for what we call polygamy, which is multiple marriages, multiple marriage partners. Polygyny, poly, P-O-L-Y-G-Y-N-Y, is a male having multiple female spouses, and polyandry is A-N-D-R-Y, is less common, and that is a female having multiple male partners. These pluralistic marriages are found around the world, but as I said, polygyny is far more common than polyandry. Polyandry in particular is found in societies where there's a lot of male mobility. So places like the Himalayas, where females stay in a village and males move in and out of the village different seasons, and they are not there permanently. And so a female, a woman, might take on multiple male partners seasonally as they come through town at different times of the year, and that provides some stability for her household. And so polygyny is found far more commonly, and that's found in many places around the world where a male has multiple female partners. But in many societies, it corresponds to wealth and status. So having multiple female partners means that you can maintain multiple female partners and the children, and you have the wealth and the power to, as a male, to be able to support that larger family. Also, because marriages are between not just individuals, but between whole family groups, these are important alliances that are created that sometimes death doesn't even destroy. And these durable alliances can be maintained after one of the marriage partners dies. A sororate, S-O-R-O-R-A-T-E, sororate marriage involves a widower marrying one of his deceased wife's sisters. And so if you get married and your wife dies, that doesn't necessarily end that family alliance. You then might take one of your sister-in-laws as your wife, and that maintains that family relationship. And the opposite of that is what's called a levirate marriage, which involves a widow marrying one of her deceased husband's brothers. So that's the same concept, but for women. And this maintains the family alliances across even across death. Divorce is something that I talked a little bit before about in a couple of different talks, that tends to be more common in matrilineal societies as well as in societies where postmarital residence is matrilocal. So where females have more value, and are trace their identity to, females have more power. And more power means being able to leave difficult or problematic marriages. And you also see increase in divorce rates in places where women have more economic freedom and more laws to protect them and their relationships, especially to children. So where women have more financial and social security, you find greater divorce or higher divorce rates because they have that option. In very strongly patriarchal and patrilocal societies, patrilineal, patriarchal societies, women don't have as many rights. And they'd be less inclined to leave their children who, as members of the father's lineage, would be expected to stay with the father. And so she wouldn't want to leave because she may never see her children again. And also, if she leaves, she would be on her own and independent financially, which she may not be able to do. So sort of counterintuitively, we think of divorce as a bad thing, but actually it's indicative of greater independence of women in most cases. I talked a little bit already about polyandry, and your book talks a little bit about online marriage market, which is changing the face of how people meet and the social and alliances that are created and how that changes things. I'll just let you read a little bit about that, but I think that's all I want to say about marriage for the time being. I'll catch you next chapter. Thanks.